He's gone. We saw the Christians defending the Muslims when they were praying. I heard some reports that when the Muslims were praying on the bridge, the Christians were guarding them against the army. Wow! Against Mr. Mubarak. A 9th century Jewish source called Sefer Petron, written, we don't know who the author was. He was definitely Jewish, one of the Jewish scholars, writing in Jerusalem in the 9th century, stated that the Muslims have made this place, Jerusalem, a place of honor and dignity. Now we can worship together. Now we can worship together. Wow, 15 minutes. I understand. So, what is happening here now? Convivencia under Islam. Peaceful coexistence under Islam. Karen Armstrong, she stated in her book, A History of Jerusalem, on page number 225, that Muslims, for the first time in the history of the Jews and the Christians, enabled three faiths to come together and live in peace. That's what she said. So Muslims came with a message which was a pluralistic message. This message brought people together instead of dividing them. So although Muslims or Islam put its case quite powerfully to the other, people were told about Islam that this is what Islam is and this is what we believe in. However, this religion will never be forced down your throat. In 256, the verse number 256 of the chapter 2 of the Quran, La ikraha fid din, qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayb. The verse is recited by my brother at the beginning of this presentation, that there is no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from the falsehood. So you may worship as you like, but this is Islam, this is what Islam is, and if you like Islam, you're welcome to come and join us, but if you do not wish to join us, then you may live as you like. This was convivencia, effectively practiced under the Islamic government in many different times, many different places, by many different people. So, in the 11th century, a Jewish author, Bahya bin Paquda, one of the Jewish rabbis alive in the 11th century Cordoba, or 11th century Islamic Spain, he writes that if one looks at our situation among the Gentiles, among the Muslims, the way we live, our condition, and I will read the most important bits, is the same as this or even better. Or even better. So a Jewish author is writing in the 11th century Spain, is saying that sometimes, in some cases, our condition, our situation, our livelihood is better than that of Muslims. Okay? So, going back to Ishaq III, writing in the 7th century when the Muslims were taking that land, he stated, a Christian patriarch in Persia, he stated that the Arabs to whom God at this time has given the dominion over us, they respect our saints and churches and do not molest us in any way. Now, have you heard of Mr. Adam Smith? I'm going to jump from the Middle Ages now straight to the Enlightenment era, when people were reading some of the past works and they were commenting on them and they were changing the way of their thinking. And this was the time when many people actually broke away from Christianity, from the religion, or to be more precise, from the doctrine of the Trinity. Many of the intellectual thinkers of the Age of Enlightenment, which was specifically in the 18th century, broke away from the doctrine of the Trinity because it didn't make sense to them, such as Isaac Newton, who was a deist, writing in secret. John Locke, the founding father of modern democratic principles, was a Unitarian. Joseph Priestley was another scientist. He was a Unitarian, and I'm not too sure whether Adam Smith was one of those people. So this was an age of change. People were commenting on some of the older works. So what did Adam Smith, who is Adam Smith first of all, who is he? Anyone? Put your hands up, please. Sorry?
Classic economist.
Economist.
Classic.
Okay. So some of you know him. Did you know that he, sorry?
Wrote The Wealth of Nations.
Yeah, that's it. A monumental work. referred to this day by the economists. And you cannot study economics and not know Adam Smith. It's like studying science and not knowing Isaac Newton. So Adam Smith was a monumental figure in the history of economic principles. Now, the question is, did you know that Adam Smith said something about Islam? Did you know that? Okay. He said something amazing about Islam, and he in fact was quite inspired by Islam. By the way, Adam Smith is on the back of the current £20 note, if you don't know. So if you take this £20 note out, he's £10 more expensive than Charles Darwin. So if you want to know who Adam Smith is, go back to the £20 note and you'll find him there. What did he say about Islam? He said that the Muslims, after the Romans, were the first people to bring people together to study the connecting principles of nature. They gave so much peace to the masses, the peace which is necessary for one to think even about science. The Muslims gave that peace to the world. And through that peace, people came together and studied the connecting principles of nature in order to make scientific progress, which is another topic in itself. And if the brothers ever invite me again, inshallah, which I don't know what's going to. Sorry again, brothers, for being late today. Yeah? So we can possibly discuss this topic as a separate topic, what the Muslims achieved for mankind in terms of scientific advancement. That's another fascinating topic, a mind-blowing topic, because my mind was blown away, because when I came across some of the sources, some of the powerful message or some of the powerful contributions Muslims made to the British society in particular, forget the world civilization, the British history in particular was shocking. Shocking. Even Oxford University. Does anyone know about the history of Oxford University, when it came about, and what was the first science to ever be taught in this university? No? The University of Oxford, the famous, great University of Oxford, which it is. Do you know anything about it? The first science which was taught in the University of Oxford was astronomy. Astronomy. The science of the heavens, about which Quran talks extensively. This science was the first science to have been taught in that university, and it came directly from the Muslim works from Spain. There were scholars such as Daniel Morley and Adil Abath. They traveled. Daniel Morley was a man who traveled to Toledo, studied under the Arabs, collected some of the books, came back to England, established some schools together with Bishop John of Norwich, and these schools were then incorporated within the University of Oxford, and the first science to have ever been taught in this university was the science of astronomy, and you can find some of the medieval old Arabic manuscripts to this day in the Bodleian Library, to this day. This is tip of the iceberg, by the way, so that the brothers can invite me again to discuss this topic. Alfred Gelone wrote a book, or edited a book together with Thomas Arnold, who is coming next after Alfred. Thomas Arnold and Alfred Gelone, two scholars, and great scholars of the 20th century, they edited this book titled The Legacy of Islam, published by the Oxford University Press in the year 1931. And in the preface, in the book they discuss the legacy of Islam, what Islam did for mankind in terms of scientific knowledge, literature, even English language is discussed. What the language, English language, took from the Arabs. You know the word cat, where it comes from? Tit, Arabic. The word camel comes from jamal in Arabic. The word cover comes from kufr, from Arabic language. And the list goes on and on. Again, when you might. So, but Islam is the fundamental fact which made the legacy possible. So he's saying it was the protection of Islam and Islamic empire which made this legacy possible. Without the protection Islam gave, the convivencia, the peaceful coexistence Islam produced, enabled this legacy to come about. Thomas Arnold, talking about Islamic Spain in particular, says that this was one of the best periods in the history of mankind, when people came together and worked together for the common good of mankind. So, Victor Robinson wrote a book on the history of medicine in the 1940s, and this is a contrast he made between medieval Europe and medieval Cordoba. Europe was darkened at sunset. Cordoba shone with public lamps. Europe was dirty. Cordoba built 1,000 baths. Europe was covered with vermin. Cordoba changed its undergarments daily. Europe lay in mud. Cordoba's streets were paved. Europe's palaces had smoke holes in the ceiling. Cordoba's arabesques were exquisite. Europe's nobility could not sign its name. Cordoba's children went to school. Europe's monks could not read the baptismal service. Cordoba's teachers created a library of Alexandrian magnitude. Victor Robinson. And then Paul Alvarez, writing in the 9th century in Spain, is complaining about the Christians because of the freedom they have in Spain under Islamic government, joining the Muslims. They're adopting the culture. They're adopting the culture of Islam, not adopting the religion in particular, but they have abandoned the Latin version of their religion, and they're adopting the Arabic books in order to educate themselves, like what is happening in this country today. Muslims are firm on their religion, fortunately. That's a good thing. That's why David Cameron is so worried about us, for some strange reason. But we are adopting the language, English language, in order to educate ourselves. Tables have turned today. So we go to the universities in the West, we educate ourselves, and we learn from our Western friends. Likewise, in the medieval Spain, this is exactly what was happening. The Christians were coming to the Muslims to educate themselves, and this was happening. Students were coming from all over Europe, from Germany, from France, from England, and from all lands. And this is the final quote, and I will end my talk with this quote so that you can ask me questions. This is a modern scholar, Adnan Rashid. He wrote a book in 1994, having studied some of the Ottoman court records from the city of Jerusalem for the year 1530 to 1600. For 70 years, for these 70 years, from 1530 to 1600, he picked up the Ottoman court records and he studied them. He wrote books on them. And what did he find in these court records? In Ottoman Jerusalem, 16th century Ottoman Jerusalem, he states that the Jews, and he found 1,000 Jewish cases filed in the court of the Qadi, the Sharia court, the Muslim court. Even though the Jews had their own Beth Din, the rabbis residing in these courts, instead of going to their own courts, the Jews were seeking justice with the Muslims in the Islamic courts, even though they had that freedom in Jerusalem. And the cases consisted of many, many different issues. So the Jews were coming to the Muslim courts to seek justice for some strange reason. And then he concludes that no one interfered, talking about the Jews in the 16th century Ottoman Jerusalem, no one interfered with, and by the way, he's Jewish himself, Adnan Rashid, and he's an Israeli. No one interfered with their internal organization or their external cultural and economic activities. In a world where civil and political equality or positive social change affecting the group or even the individual were not the norms, the Sultan's Jewish subjects had no reason to mourn their status or begrudge their conditions of life. The Jews of Ottoman Jerusalem enjoyed religious and administrative autonomy within an Islamic state. This was shocking for myself. When I read this for the first time, this was shocking for me. I couldn't believe it. So this is what the Muslims produced in different ages, in different times, different places for different people. And the behavior seems to be consistent. Of course, there were periods of disturbances. We had our Timalanes and Barbers carrying out massacres. We had people who did atrocious things in our history. But the norm, the overwhelming norm, the general picture of the history of Islam is this picture. convivencia was the spirit, not division. So we